Thank you so much for your time, Ambassador Son, and for inviting us here to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs today.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here with you.
Well, as we all know, Korea, of course, was selected to be the Secretariat for the Green Climate Fund. But first of all, could you tell us a little bit about the Green Climate Fund? What is it?
Yes, climate change is a defining issue of 21st century, and finance is the essential element of any international agreements, including climate change convention. The idea of a green climate fund was initiated in Copenhagen 2009, but the idea was not formally endorsed, just merely noted. So 1 year later in Cancun, the Green Climate Fund formally established. So last year in Durban, with the adoption of design and governing structures, the enabling condition was created for making Green Climate Fund operationalized.
So what would you say then is the role that it plays in the world today?
The GCF, the Green Climate Fund, was established for supporting the global action, particularly in developing countries, when they take action for the mitigation as well as adaptation to climate change. So in most of the cases in developing countries lack the resources and capacity. So without the external support, they could not make the meaningful action to address the global phenomenon of climate change. That's the reasoning. That's the reason why the Green Climate Fund was established.
Let's actually talk a little more about that, because developing countries, of course, they're already going through transitions, and it's a hard enough time as it is, but when natural disasters hit, it's hard for them to get back on their feet without the help of funding from outside countries, right? So could you tell us a little bit more about that situation?
You're right. And the extreme weather events are taking place all across the world very often. It is not the unique phenomenon. It is a commonplace, common phenomena. But as I said, in most cases, developing countries doesn't have the sufficient capacity to deal with that phenomenon. Let me cite some example in Asia.
Yes.
2 years ago in Pakistan, a great flooding took place. The 1,700 people were killed because of the very large-scale flooding, and the estimated cost of loss and damage amounted $10 billion. Wow. And the recovery cost is estimated at about 6 and 9 billion. And let me give another example in Thailand, involving Thailand. Last year, the great flooding afflicted Thailand. The 700 people were dead because of the flood, and the loss and damage is even larger than Pakistan. And in the case of Thailand, the loss and damage amounted about 45 billion US dollars. The full recovery cost is estimated at 47. The intensity and frequency of the extreme weather event it will be more strengthened as the year passes by.
Now, the figures and examples you just gave us, that's just from Asia alone, right? I mean, even recently, even the U.S., countries like the U.S. suffered from Hurricane Sandy and whatnot, right? So I would imagine the GCF, it would need quite a lot of money. In terms of financial resources, how would you compare it to the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank?
I think according to the agreement by the international community in the context of climate change negotiation, the GCF is expected to generate the 100 billion US dollars per year by 2020. There is a caveat here, because there is some different interpretation. the first interpretation on the scale of the generated money. I mean, the first interpretation is that the GCF should be generated $100 billion per year from 2013 to 2020. That is one of the interpretation. The second interpretation is that GCF is a scale of the finance up to the 2020, and from 2020, the global community have to generate $100 billion from 2020 onwards. So there is some clarity. So I think that we'll have more clarity in the upcoming annual conferences, which will take place in Doha in coming November.
Right.
In the Copenhagen conference, the developed countries agreed to provide the short-term assistance to developing countries, which is called the Fast Start Finance. Fast Start Finance means that the support for the 3 years from 2010 to 2012, each year $10 billion to developing nations. So altogether, 3 years assistance amount will amount to $30 billion. But the problem is that after the 2012 up to 2020, there is no clear pictures up to now. So the Doha meeting, which takes place in next month, will be a good opportunity to clarify and also ask the developed nation to come forward with renewed commitment for that intervening period.
The Korean government was very proactive in terms of trying to push for Korea to become the host for the GCF. Why would you say, what were some of the reasons behind Korea's proactive stance?
As we all know, there were 6 candidate countries. Their proposal was more or less very appealing and competitive. However, what made Korean proposal unique is that the Korean proposal took into account the circumstances of the other developing countries. Korea became a prosperous country from the war-devastated country in the 1950s. The part of our success was the assistance, external assistance delivered to Korea during that period. So it is our feeling that it is now for us to pay back what have received in the past, pay back to the global community. The character of GCF is supporting other developing countries when they are struggling to address the very tremendous problem of climate change. So it is a quite opportune time for us to compete for the benefit of the entire global community. And let me say one other thing. During the past several years, we established very good track record in the promotion of global green growth policies. I missed one objective of GCF. The ultimate objective of GCF is transform the developed country into low carbon and climate resilient economy. So we know in view of our development experience, we know better the situation of other developing countries. So I think we thought that it was an opportune time for us to compete with other countries for the benefit of the welfare and development of other fellow developing countries. That was the main motivation. So the other rationale of our proposal was that all the important full-fledged international organizations are housed in other continents, for example, in North America and Europe. So it is time for us to make contribution by hosting very meaningful and full-fledged international organizations like GCF in Asian continent. And the GCF is a main source of GCF would be the private sector investment. So Asian continent will be the area which has the advantage to mobilize private investment, which is essential, which would be the essential component of the financial sources of GCF.
Right, right. Okay. Some people even say that the GCF, it can actually boost national security. Would you say you agree or disagree with that?
I'm not expert on that. However, liberal theory says that democracy, economic interdependence, and international organization are conducive in preventing the armed conflict. So with the combination of three factors, the world is likely to be more stable and prosperous. There are another point I'd like to make is that GCF is designed to mobilize a huge amount of money. So the private investment is a part of that financial resources. So the mobilized financial resources by the GCF will definitely benefit more or less developing country in general. So any armed conflict is not good for the flow of large scale investment. So world community has a common position to keep the GCF, the area in which GCF is operating,
the hosting country,
the hosting country is as peaceful and as stable as possible. That is the benefit of the whole international community, including particularly developing nations.
Well, good news for Korea, if in theory, if that holds true, right? There's a lot of potential we're seeing through the GCF, and it's going to take efforts, of course, from the Korean government. What kind of plans does the South Korean government have to push for more stable growth at the GCF?
There are two areas we have to reflect. The first area is that we have to make an enabling condition for the GCF to start as early as possible as a full-fledged organization. To do that, we have to conclude the host country headquarter agreements with the Secretariat. That agreement is needed for the step of GCF. Interim Secretary of GCF could move to the Songdo as early as possible. In that agreement, there is a component of privilege and immunities. So that by concluding the agreement, we can sort out the problems. And secondly, Korea should demonstrate our leadership in expanding, securing the funding base, enlarging the funding base. Currently, the GCF will be contributed by the only developed nation. But as a host country, we try to encourage other developing countries with capacity to take part in the enlarging the funding base. So without which I think there are some criticism GCF will not be a very viable and meaningful financial mechanism. So that is one, as I said, one thing is administrative preparation should be made by us as early as possible. And for the early startup of GCF, second thing is more policy-related thing is that we have to take the leadership in making GCF up and running as soon as possible.
Okay. Well, we will count on the Korean government to do their best in doing all those things. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Ambassador Son, for your time today.
Thank you for inviting me. It is a nice opportunity to tell the Arirang viewers on the GCF and its implication.
That's great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.